When my mother told me she had lied to protect me, I didn't know how to feel. There was silence between us, the kind that doesn't need words, the kind that says everything. She sat on the old wooden chair near the window, hands folded together like she was still praying for strength. That day, I didn't cry. Not because it didn't hurt, but because the truth came so late, after everything that had already been lost. Sometimes, love doesn't shout. Sometimes, it hides behind quiet lies, told not to deceive, but to protect. And that's what my mother did. She lied to save me from pain. But that lie became the reason our family fell apart. I was her only son, and for most of my life, I thought we were like any other small, ordinary family. We didn't have much, but we had each other, or at least, I believed we did. Our house was small, 2 bedrooms and a little kitchen that always smelled like chai and fried onions. My mother, Sira, was the kind of woman people respected, strong, quiet, and always composed. She never raised her voice, even when she was angry. Her eyes said what her lips wouldn't. My father passed away when I was 12. It was sudden, a heart attack in his sleep. I remember standing in that crowded living room, watching people whisper and cry, and thinking how small she looked among them all. But she never cried in front of me, not once. Your father loved you, she'd tell me, every time I asked about him. He wanted you to be a good man, don't forget that, and I never did. Growing up, I watched her work harder than anyone I knew. She cooked, cleaned, and took stitching orders from neighbors to make ends meet. At night, when I studied, she'd sit nearby, sewing under the dim yellow light. Sometimes she'd smile at me and say, "One day, you'll make me proud." And I believed her, but there was always something unspoken in her eyes, a kind of fear, or maybe guilt as a child. I never questioned it. As an adult, I wish I had. When I got married, she smiled wider than I'd ever seen. She liked my wife, Alina, at least at first. Alina was kind, soft-spoken, and always eager to please. In the early days, our home felt alive again. The kitchen smelled of spices and laughter. But things changed slowly, like a quiet storm that builds without warning. I didn't notice it at first. The distance between my mother and my wife, the small silences at the dinner table, the way Alina would smile politely, but never meet my mother's eyes. When I asked about it, both women brushed it off. It's nothing. Alina would say your mother's just traditional, and my mother would reply, she's young, she'll learn. I believed both, and that was my first mistake. One night, I came home late from work. Alina was in the kitchen, wiping her tears quietly. When she saw me, she turned away. What happened? I asked. Nothing, she said, but her voice trembled. I pressed again, and finally, she whispered, your mother doesn't like me. I froze. What do you mean? She thinks I'm not good enough for you. She told me I don't belong here. My heart sank. That didn't sound like my mother, the woman who raised me to respect kindness and truth. Could she really say that? I wanted to ask my mother, but Alina begged me not to. She just denied it, she said, and something in her tone made me believe her, so I stayed quiet. And the silence between us grew thicker. The months that followed felt heavy. Small misunderstandings turned into quiet wars. My mother stopped joining us for dinner. Alina stopped sitting in the living room when my mother was around. I tried to balance both worlds, a dutiful son and a caring husband. But no matter how hard I tried, someone was always hurt. One evening, while my mother was praying, I overheard her whispering softly, tears in her voice, Ya Allah, protect my son. Let him not hate me for what I did. It broke something inside me, because I didn't know what she meant. What had she done? Then came the day that changed everything. It was raining, the kind of soft, steady rain that makes everything feel heavier than it is. Alina had packed her things. Her suitcase was by the door. I stood there, drenched and confused, asking her what was happening. She looked at me with tired eyes and said, I can't stay in this house anymore. I asked, my voice breaking, because your mother will never accept me. She made it clear. And then she said something I'll never forget. She told me a lie about you, something I can't live with. My chest tightened. What did she say? But Alina shook her head. Ask her yourself. And she left. When I went to my mother, she didn't cry or argue. She just sat there on her prayer mat. As if she had been waiting for this moment, I shouted. I demanded answers. What did you say to her? Why did you make her leave? She looked up at me with wet eyes and whispered, because I had to protect you, Bata. Protect me from what? from the truth. And in that moment, that quiet, heart-stopping moment, I realized something terrible. My life had been built on something I didn't understand, something hidden, something buried. That was the day everything began to unravel. The day I learned that even love, when wrapped in lies, can destroy everything it's meant to save. I grew up believing that my mother was the strongest person in the world. After my father passed away, she became everything, both mother and father, comfort and discipline, laughter and silence. She never complained, not even when things were hard. There were days when we had only lentils and bread for dinner, and she'd smile as if it were a feast. Food tastes better when your heart is grateful, she used to say. I didn't understand it then, but now that I'm older, I realize she was teaching me how to survive life, not just live it. We lived in a quiet neighborhood, the kind where everyone knew each other's names. Our house was old, but it carried warmth. The walls were faded, the furniture mismatched, yet there was always peace, the kind that comes when love fills the gaps. Money cannot. My mother loved tending to her plants. Small pots of jasmine and tulsi lined our windowsill. She'd water them at dawn, humming softly to herself. To her, plants were like children. They needed patience, time, and care. Sometimes I'd wake up early just to watch her move around the garden. There was something calming about it, like the world stopped rushing for a moment. Just to listen to her silence. As a teenager, I didn't realize how much she gave up. For me, she sold her jewelry, her wedding bangles, so I could go to a better school. She took on extra sewing work when I wanted new books. And when I got my first part-time job, I proudly handed her my paycheck. She looked at it, smiled softly, and said, "You keep it." A mother's reward is seeing her son stand tall. That moment never left me. Years passed. Life became busier, noisier, and I thought I was doing well. I graduated, found a job in a small company, and rented an apartment close to home. Even then, I visited her almost every day. She'd always greet me the same way, a hand on my cheek, a small smile, and a question that never changed. "Did you eat?" No matter how old I got, to her I was still the boy who came home hungry from school. When I met Alina, my mother was the first person I told. Alina worked in the same office as me, gentle, with the kind of voice that carried calm. She cared about people deeply, sometimes more than she cared for herself, and when she smiled, her eyes softened like she'd known you all her life. My mother listened quietly as I described her. Then she said, "If she loves you the way you love her, then she's already family." That was all the approval I needed. The day Alina first came home, my mother made biryani, her special one, the kind she only cooked for celebrations. She'd been in the kitchen since morning, carefully grinding spices, tasting the rice, setting the table. When Alina arrived, nervous but smiling, my mother welcomed her with open arms. "Welcome, Beta," she said warmly. "This home is yours too." I still remember that moment clearly. The two women who meant the most to me, standing together, smiling politely at each other, trying to find common ground. I thought everything was perfect. For a while, it was. Our wedding was small but beautiful. We didn't have much money, but we had laughter, and that was enough. My mother looked radiant that day. She stood beside me proudly, as if every hardship she had endured was worth it. I saw her watching Alina during the ceremony, her eyes soft, maybe even hopeful. Later she told me, "She seems like a good girl. You chose well." I hugged her, not knowing that years later, those same words would haunt me. After the wedding, Alina and I moved in with my mother. It made sense. The house was big enough for three, and my mother was getting older. At first, everything seemed peaceful. Alina helped my mother in the kitchen, learned her recipes, even sat with her in the evenings while I worked late. I'd come home to laughter, soft, shared, womanly laughter that filled the home with warmth. It was everything I'd dreamed of. Sometimes, I'd stand in the doorway and just watch them, my mother and my wife, two different generations of love sitting side by side. I thought, maybe this is what happiness really looks like. But happiness has a strange way of testing you. It comes quietly, but it never stays unchallenged. It started with small things, unspoken words, tiny misunderstandings, like a hairline crack in a glass, invisible at first, until one day, the whole thing shatters. One morning, I noticed Alina wasn't wearing the gold bangles my mother had gifted her. When I asked, she smiled awkwardly and said, "I don't wear gold to work." It seemed normal, so I let it go. Later that evening, I heard my mother quietly say, "She didn't like my bangles. Maybe she thinks they're too old-fashioned." I laughed it off, told her she was overthinking, but I saw the disappointment in her eyes, the kind of hurt that comes when love isn't returned in the same language. Then there were the meals. My mother had a habit of waking up early to cook. Alina preferred cooking later in the day. Their routines clashed silently, like waves against a wall. Your mother never lets me cook my way, Alina once said softly, and another time, my mother sighed. She doesn't respect the kitchen traditions. I tried to mediate, but how do you choose between two hearts that both love you, one who gave you life, and one who became your life? So, I stayed quiet. And silence, I learned, is not peace. It's just the sound of something breaking slowly. On Sundays, when we'd all sit together for breakfast, I could feel the space between them growing. It wasn't about food or chores. It was about belonging. My mother had lived her whole life creating a home, and suddenly, she felt like a guest in it. One evening, I found her sitting alone in the courtyard. The lamp beside her flickered weakly. I sat beside her and said, "Amy, is something wrong?" She looked at me for a long time before saying quietly, "When a new person enters a house, old shadows must make room for her light. But sometimes, the shadow forgets how to fade." I didn't understand what she meant, but I remember holding her hand, feeling how cold it was. At the same time, Alina began withdrawing too. She'd spend more time in our room, reading or visiting her mother. When I asked, she'd smile and say, "Just tired," but her smile didn't reach her eyes anymore. I started feeling like I was standing between two walls closing in, and I didn't know how to stop it. There was one moment that still plays in my mind like an old record. It was my birthday. Alina had baked a cake, and my mother had cooked all my favorite dishes. But instead of feeling loved, the air was heavy, like everyone was pretending to be happy. When I blew out the candles, I made a silent wish: let things go back to how they used to be. But wishes don't heal wounds that love is too proud to speak of. Days turned into months. The tension became a quiet part of our lives, always there, sitting in the corners of our conversations. I started working longer hours, thinking that maybe if I stayed away, things would calm down. But when love is unbalanced, distance doesn't fix it. It just deepens the cracks. Looking back, I think my mother knew something I didn't. She saw what was coming. Maybe even before any of us did. She'd sit alone more often, her prayer beads slowly sliding through her fingers. Her eyes seemed far away, like she was carrying a secret she didn't know how to share. Sometimes, she'd whisper things during her prayers, things I could barely hear. "Protect him, Ya Allah, keep him safe from what I fear." And I used to think she was praying about my health or my future. I never imagined she was praying about a truth she had buried long ago. If I could go back, I'd tell her to speak then, before the silence grew roots, before her lie turned into a wall between us. But love makes you blind to the cracks until the roof falls in. And when it does, it's always too late to ask why. You never realize how fragile peace is until the smallest sound breaks it in our home. That sound wasn't shouting or fighting. It was silence. It began quietly. No one said anything, but everything was said in the way they looked at each other, or didn't. The way Alina would set the teacups on the table a little too firmly. The way my mother would walk past her without asking if she needed help. Tried to convince myself it was normal that every home has small differences, but deep down, I knew something was slipping away, one unspoken word at a time. Alina and I had been married for 2 years then, 2 years of adjusting, learning, and sometimes pretending. At first, I thought marriage was just about love, holding hands, sharing dreams, but I learned that love isn't always enough. It needs patience, space, and truth was slowly disappearing from our home. I still remember one evening when I came home early. The rain had started again, soft and steady against the windows. I heard voices from the kitchen, low, tense. "Amy, please don't interfere." Alina's voice trembled. "This is our life now." My mother's voice was calm, almost pleading. "I'm only saying what's best for you both. I've seen more of this world." I stood outside the door, frozen. 2 women I loved, speaking like strangers. Alina continued, "I know you mean well, but sometimes love can feel like control." My heart sank. I didn't know whether to step in or walk away. Instead, I did what I'd done too often. I pretended I hadn't heard anything. Later that night, I asked Alina, "Did something happen today?" She smiled weakly. "No, nothing. but I saw the tiredness in her eyes, not from work, but from holding back too much for too long. The next morning, my mother was quiet too. She placed breakfast on the table but didn't sit down. When I asked if she'd eaten, she nodded and walked away. Even her footsteps sounded heavy. That's when I realized, sometimes silence is not peace, it's exhaustion. It's what happens when words stop working. Weeks went by. The air in our house felt colder. Even when the sun was shining, we stopped having dinner together. Alina preferred to eat in our room. My mother stopped waiting for us at the table. One Sunday morning, as I was leaving for work, my mother called out softly, "Beta, can we talk?" I turned, a little impatient. "Later, Amy, I'm running late." Her lips parted like she wanted to say something, but she didn't single quotes. She just nodded and said, "Okay, later then." I didn't know it then, but that later never really came. That evening, when I returned, the house was quiet again, the kind of quiet that felt heavy, like a secret sitting between the walls. I found Alina sitting on the bed, staring at the floor. "Everything okay?" I asked. She looked up and said, "Your mother told me not to work anymore." I frowned. Why would she say that? She said a wife should stay home, that her place is with her husband. She said I'm forgetting my duties. I sighed. I'm sure she didn't mean it that way. But Alina's eyes filled with tears. She did, and it's not the first time. I went to talk to my mother that night. She was folding laundry.com, as ever. "Amy, did you tell Alina not to work?" She looked at me, surprised. "I only said that she should take care of herself. She's always tired." "Amy," I said gently, "she loves her job. Please don't make her feel guilty for it." Her eyes softened for a moment, then turned distant. "I'm not making her feel guilty. I'm trying to protect her." "Protect her from what?" She hesitated, her fingers tightening around the fabric in her hands. "From what this world does to women who forget their homes," she said quietly. I didn't understand what she meant then. To me, it sounded like old-fashioned worry. But now, I know there was more behind her words, a story she hadn't told. That night, Alina and I argued for the first time. "You always take her side," she said. "I'm not taking sides," I replied. "Yes, you are," she whispered. "You just don't want to admit it." I didn't shout. I just walked out of the room, because sometimes silence feels easier than trying to explain your heart. But silence also builds distance, brick by brick. As the weeks went on, my mother started spending more time in prayer. Sometimes, I'd wake up in the middle of the night and see her sitting on her prayer mat, whispering to God, her back slightly bent, her eyes closed, her lips trembling in quiet supplication. Once, I asked her what she prayed for. She smiled faintly and said, "Peace for all of us." I thought she meant peace in our home. But maybe she was praying for peace in her heart, the kind that only comes after years of carrying something too heavy to share. The next few months were a blur of small arguments, long silences, and endless confusion. I started staying longer at work, sometimes grabbing dinner outside just to avoid coming home to tension. I told myself it was temporary, that every family goes through phases, but deep down, I felt something slipping away, something fragile that I didn't know how to hold on to. Then one day, my mother fell sick. It wasn't serious, just a fever and fatigue. Still, I stayed home from work to take care of her. Alina cooked soup and brought it to her room. For the first time in months, they spoke kindly to each other. I remember feeling hopeful again. Maybe things were turning around. My mother smiled at Alina weakly and said, "You remind me of someone I once knew." Alina smiled back, "Someone good, I hope." My mother didn't answer. She just looked away, tears forming in her eyes. That night, after Alina went to bed, my mother called me to her side. Her voice was weak, almost trembling. "Beta," she said softly, "if I ever do something that hurts you, promise me you'll remember I love you." I frowned. "Amy, what are you saying?" "Just promise me." I nodded, uneasy. "I promised." She smiled faintly and said, "Good. Then, I can rest now." I kissed her forehead and told her to sleep. I didn't know that the promise I made that night would come back to break me later. Days passed. Her fever subsided, but her silence didn't. Something about her had changed, like she'd decided something she couldn't take back. Began spending more time with the old letters she kept in her drawer, letters from my father, yellowed with time. Sometimes, I'd find her reading them, whispering something under her breath. Once, I asked her, "Amy, what are those letters about?" She smiled faintly. "They're memories, Beta. Some memories protect you more than truth ever could." I didn't understand, but I let it go. A few days later, Alina found one of those letters while cleaning the room. When I came home that evening, she was holding it, her hands shaking. Did you know about this? She asked. About what? She handed me the letter. It was old, written in my mother's handwriting. The words blurred as I read. If anyone asks, he's our child. No one needs to know what really happened. My heart stopped. I looked at Alina, confused. What is this? She whispered. It means you're not who you think you are. I laughed nervously, shaking my head. That's not possible. But the look on her face told me she wasn't joking. She said she lied to protect you, Alina whispered. What does that mean? I didn't know. All I knew was that everything suddenly felt unstable. The air, the ground beneath me, even my own name. I went to my mother's room, letter in hand. She looked up, calm, almost expecting me. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time in my life, I saw fear there. Amy, I said quietly, what is this? She didn't answer right away. She just closed her eyes and whispered, so you found it. I felt my chest tighten. Found what? The truth. Her voice broke as she said, I never wanted you to find it like this. What truth, Amy? Please, tell me. She took a deep breath, tears sliding down her cheeks. I lied to protect you, Beta. I did what any mother would do. Her words echoed in the room. I lied to protect you. And in that moment, everything began to fall apart. That night, Alina and I didn't sleep. She held my hand, but I could feel the distance between us growing. We both knew this lie, whatever it was, had already broken something inside our home, and as dawn crept in through the curtains, I realized something painful. Sometimes, the truth doesn't destroy you, it's the waiting, the years of silence, that do. The morning after I found that letter, the world felt quieter than usual. Even the birds outside seemed hesitant to sing. There was a heaviness in the air, not from sadness alone, but from the weight of questions that had no gentle answers. That my mother sat near the window again, her favorite spot. Her hands were still, resting on her lap, as if she'd already accepted that the time for hiding was over. When she saw me, she smiled faintly, but her eyes looked tired, not from sleeplessness, but from years of carrying something too heavy alone. I walked up to her slowly, the letter trembling in my hands. Amy, I whispered. I read it. She nodded once, like she already knew. Then you know, she said softly. I know that something's not right, I replied. But I don't know what it means. She took a deep breath, her voice trembling. Sit down, Beta. It's time you heard everything. I sat across from her. The rain outside had started again, softly tapping against the glass like a rhythm that belonged to old memories. She looked out for a moment, and then back at me. You were never meant to find that letter, she began quietly. It was written long ago, before you could even speak. I thought I could protect you from a truth that might destroy you. My heart thudded in my chest. What truth? Her eyes filled with tears. That I am not your real mother. The words hit me like cold water. For a second, I couldn't breathe. What are you saying? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She looked down at her hands, trembling. You were my sister's child, she said. Your mother, my younger sister. She died giving birth to you. I stared at her, unblinking, my mind spinning. What, my real mother? She was very young, she continued, her voice breaking. She made mistakes, the kind society never forgives. She loved the man who left her before he even knew about you. My whole body felt numb. I wanted to speak, but no words came. All I could hear was the rain, steady and cruel, like a heartbeat outside the window. I was married then, she continued softly. Your father, the man you called Abu, knew the truth. We both decided to raise you as our own, to give you a name, a home, a life without shame. She wiped her tears with her dupatta, her voice shaking. I told everyone you were mine. I lied to protect you, Bate, to protect you from the cruelty of this world. I didn't want you to grow up being called an orphan, or worse. I felt my chest tighten as if something heavy was pressing against it. The woman I had loved all my life, the woman who had raised me, fed me, prayed for me, was telling me she wasn't my mother, and yet, in that moment, all I could feel was love. A deep, painful, helpless love. I asked softly, why didn't you tell me before? She smiled faintly, tears glistening in her eyes. Because you were happy, and I thought, if you never knew, the lie would hurt no one. But then, Alina found the letter. I should have burned it long ago. Her voice broke then, the calm finally shattering. I only wanted to protect you, but I didn't realize my silence would destroy your peace. I sat there, unable to speak, that the truth was too heavy to accept, yet too real to deny. Ami, I whispered finally, you may not have given me life, but you gave me everything that makes life worth living. She looked up at me, startled. You don't hate me. I shook my head, my eyes wet. How can I hate the only person who ever stood by me? You didn't lie out of selfishness, you lied out of love. Her lips trembled, and for the first time in years, she broke down completely. I held her as she cried, the kind of crying that comes not from weakness, but from released out years of silence, spilling out like water after a storm. That evening, I told Alina everything. She sat quietly, her face pale, her hands clasped tightly together. So that's why she said she was protecting you, she whispered. Yes, I said, she was protecting me from a truth she thought would ruin me. Alina nodded slowly. I understand now, but it must have been hard for her, living with that every day. It was, I said softly. She carried it alone. There was a long silence, broken only by the sound of rain on the roof. Alina reached over, took my hand, and said, maybe now, all three of us can heal. Lies hurt, but sometimes the truth heals what's left. I nodded, but deep down, I knew it wouldn't be that simple. The next morning, my mother didn't come out of her room. I found her sitting by the window again, staring out at the rain. Her prayer beads lay in her lap, untouched. Ami, I said softly, come, eat something. She smiled faintly. In a while, Beta. I hesitated, then said, I told Alina everything. She understands now. Her eyes filled with tears again. I didn't mean for her to know this way, she whispered. She's a good girl. I only wanted peace for you both. I knelt beside her. You did your best, I said. You gave me more than I could ever repay. She cupped my face gently, her hands cold but tender. Promise me one thing, she said. Don't let this truth separate you from your family again. I lied to protect you. Don't let my lie become your wall. I promise, I whispered. She smiled softly, the kind of smile that carries both love and farewell. That night, I dreamt of her, younger, happier, laughing in the garden with my father. And in the dream, she turned to me and said, now you know everything, Beta, live free. I woke up to an eerie quiet. The house felt too still. I knocked on her door, no answer. When I opened it, she was lying peacefully on her bed, her prayer beads still in her hand. Her face looked calm, almost smiling, as if she'd been waiting to leave after the truth had finally set her free. The days that followed were heavy. People came, whispered prayers, shared condolences, but my heart was somewhere else. Sitting by that window where she used to pray, I kept replaying her words in my mind. I lied to protect you, Beta. It took me time, months, to understand what she truly meant. Sometimes, love isn't about truth or lies, it's about sacrifice. She carried a secret that wasn't hers to bear, just so I could live without shame. She gave up her own peace to build mine. And though her lie broke our family apart for a while, it also showed me what love really means. Now, every morning, I water her plants. The jasmine, the tulsi, the roses, all still growing, just like her love. I tell my children stories about their grandmother, not as the woman who lied, but as the woman who loved fiercely, selflessly, quietly. And sometimes, when the rain begins to fall, I stand by that same window and whisper, Ami, I forgive you. I understand now. Because in the end, her lie wasn't a betrayal. It was love in disguise, love that tried to protect me, even if it cost her everything.